Millions of years ago, the world was not ours. Humans were not hunters, we were the hunted, we were prey. Surrounded by giants, by creatures of nightmare size and strength, a small fragile species fought for its very existence. This is the story of how Homo Habilis survived a world that wanted them dead. Millions of years ago, Earth was a brutal, unforgiving place. Forget cities, forget weapons, forget any notion of safety. The African continent, the cradle of humanity, was ruled by giants. Predators of immense power roamed the savannas and forests. Saber-toothed cats with fangs like daggers stalked the grasslands. Massive hyenas, larger and more powerful than any we know today, could crush bone with a single bite. And soaring through the skies were deadly birds of prey, capable of snatching up creatures far larger than a man. In this terrifying high-stakes world lived a small, seemingly insignificant species called Homo habilis. They were a whisper in a world of roars, a flicker of life in the shadow of giants. For them, survival was not a guarantee. It was a daily, desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. How could something so small and weak possibly endure in a land of monsters? The name Homo habilis means the handyman, a title that hints at their secret to survival. Physically, they were no match for the world around them. Standing only about 4 feet tall, they were fragile and weak. They possessed no sharp claws to rend flesh, no powerful jaws to crush their enemies, and certainly not the speed needed to outrun the giant predators that hunted them. If you placed a Homo habilis next to a saber-toothed cat, the outcome would seem inevitable. They were, by all physical metrics, a failed experiment, destined for extinction. But they had something that no giant predator possessed, a spark that would eventually ignite the flame of human civilization. While they lacked physical prowess, they were beginning to think in ways no other creature on Earth had before. And in that nascent intelligence, that budding creativity, lay the key to their improbable survival. Imagine a life where every single day is a gamble with death. For Homo habilis, this was reality. Every moment was fraught with peril. A simple trip to a waterhole was like walking into a death trap, as these were the prime hunting grounds for the giants. The tall grass that covered the savanna wasn't just scenery. It was a perfect hiding spot for a predator waiting in ambush. A cry of pain or a shout to a companion could be a dinner bell, attracting unwanted attention from every carnivore in the vicinity. A single mistake, a moment of carelessness, a wrong turn, a stumble meant instant death. There were no second chances. Life was lived on a knife's edge, a constant state of high alert. The world was a labyrinth of threats, and for Homo habilis, navigating it required not just luck, but a level of awareness and caution that is almost unimaginable to us today. But Homo habilis possessed an advantage that was invisible, yet more powerful than any fang or claw: intelligence. This was their game changer. They began to look at the world differently. A simple rock wasn't just a rock, it was a potential tool. They learned to see the angles, the fractures, the possibilities within a piece of stone. With careful, deliberate strikes, they shaped river cobbles into sharp-edged implements. These first tools were simple, crude by our standards, but they were revolutionary. Suddenly, their weak hands had an edge. With these stone tools, they could do things that were previously impossible. They could slice through tough animal hides to get to the meat underneath. They could crack open thick bones to access the rich, calorie-dense marrow inside, a vital source of nutrition. And when cornered, a sharp rock was better than an empty hand. The humble stone tool became their first weapon, their first shield, their first real answer to the giants. They were not hunters of giants. That would have been suicide. Homo habilis understood their place in the food chain. They were strategists, opportunists. They were scavengers. They watched and they waited. They would observe from a safe distance as a massive predator, like a Dinophilis, brought down a large herbivore. Once the giant had eaten its fill and moved away, the clock started. This was the window of opportunity for Homo habilis. They would rush in, a flurry of desperate activity. Using their stone tools, they worked with frantic speed, cutting away scraps of meat, hacking off limbs, and smashing bones for marrow. They knew the predator could return at any moment, or that other scavengers, like giant hyenas, were on their way. It was a race against time. Scavenging wasn't a noble pursuit. It was a dangerous, high-risk, high-reward strategy for survival. Speed, efficiency, and teamwork meant the difference between a life-saving meal and becoming a meal themselves. A single Homo habilis was dead. They knew this instinctively. Survival was never a solo mission. They lived and moved in small cooperative groups. This social structure was their greatest shield, more effective than any stone tool. A group meant more eyes and ears to watch for danger. While some were busy butchering a carcass, others would stand guard, scanning the horizon for returning predators. They shared what they found. The food brought back to the group was for the group, ensuring that everyone, even the young and the weak, had a chance to eat. Communication, though likely simple, was a lifeline. A series of grunts, gestures, and warning calls could convey complex information. Danger! Predator approaching. Follow me. This cooperation, this sense of shared fate and mutual reliance, transformed them from a collection of weak individuals into a resilient and adaptable social unit. Even moments of rest offered no real safety. The dangers didn't disappear when the sun went down. Night brought a new set of threats. Giant cats, many of them nocturnal hunters, prowled the darkness. Packs of hyenas, with their incredible sense of smell, would try to steal any food they had managed to secure. A simple injury, a cut from a sharp stone or a sprained ankle, could be a death sentence. There was no medicine, no antibiotics, no way to treat infection. A wound that we would consider minor today could lead to a slow, agonizing death. Their shelters, likely simple collections of branches or overhangs in rocks, offered little real protection against a determined predator. Survival depended on constant, unrelenting awareness and a healthy dose of luck. They lived in a state of permanent vulnerability, where the only true defense was the group and the wits of each member within it. So why did they survive? Against all odds, against a world of giants, how did this fragile, 4-foot-tall hominin endure? They survived because they adapted. Where they lacked strength, they used their brains. Where they lacked claws and teeth, they used tools. Where they were vulnerable, they found strength in groups. This was a fundamental shift in the rules of evolution. For eons, survival had been about being bigger, faster, or stronger. Homo habilis introduced a new variable into the equation: intelligence. They solved problems not with brute force but with ingenuity. They outthought their competition rather than outfighting them. They proved that a clever mind could be more deadly than the sharpest fang, and that cooperation could be a stronger defense than the thickest hide. In the epic battle of brawn versus brains, Homo habilis was the first to prove that brains could win. The legacy of Homo habilis is not written in stone monuments or grand cities. They didn't build pyramids. They didn't even control fire that would come much, much later. Their contribution was something more fundamental, more profound. They were the pioneers of human ingenuity. They took the first crucial step on the long road that would lead to us. They proved that a species could overcome its physical limitations through thought and innovation. Every time we use a tool, solve a problem, or work together to achieve a goal, we are walking in the footsteps of Homo habilis. They are the distant, ancient ancestors who faced down a world of monsters and refused to be erased. Every human being alive today is a testament to their struggle, a result of their incredible, desperate fight for survival. Surrounded by giants, they were small. In a world of predators, they were prey. But Homo habilis refused to disappear. They held on. This was not yet the age of humans, not the era of our dominion. This was the age of survival. A brutal, terrifying, and foundational chapter in our story. And it all began with a spark of intelligence and a sharpened stone millions of years ago. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into our deep past fascinating, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories about our incredible human story.